Fallout 76 absolutely cannot launch like this, and it's not just the bugs that are concerning me. I'll be making a full, heavily stylized and traditional piece on Fallout 76 once it launches in its finished state, but I feel like it's important to talk about the state of the game now, in a state that is purportedly unfinished, less than just 2 weeks before its release, because at this point, we're looking at what is very close to a finished game. Bethesda did get out ahead of this beta. The beta logo literally says, "Break it first." They know and have openly stated that the game is going to struggle in beta, but what I'm most concerned about is the idea of giving Bethesda a pass for a game that is meant to be finished on November 14th. Now, it's important to note that every single negative I have here can be viewed by some, or at least most of them, as positives. So I'm going to talk about what actually is positive about these negatives, and why it's not so positive to me, but why it certainly might be to someone else. I don't want people to think that this game is objectively bad or objectively not good. That's simply not the case. The case here is some problems that I have that maybe aren't to you. So after each and every negative, we'll talk about that positive. It's important to note that this is a beta, so all of this can change, but some of it probably won't. So let's, a bit more casually than usual, talk about exactly what concerns me. Here's a problem that's not going to change, and a problem I'm all but certain I'll be addressing when it comes time to evaluate the full release. I'm a massive Fallout fan. Fallout 3 is one of my favorite games of all time, but I'm going to look at this as just another game instead of another Fallout game, and I can confidently say, regardless of that, 76 does not make a great first impression. The creepy Reclamation Day vibe in the vault is cool enough, walking you through it, supplying you, but then you leave and well, that was essentially that. You spend the next couple hours going from mundane fetch quest to mundane fetch quest in environments that are next to barren. It does a good enough job of being a tutorial. You'll learn how to cook, how to set up camp, how to trade, but there's absolutely no attempt to actually engage you throughout this process outside of the constant pinging of new challenges and level up notifications. It's the most boring and uninteresting introduction to a game I've played this year. Whereas Fallout 3 walks you through a small narrative, and New Vegas and 4 as well to start your journey, here you get, "Here's some stuff, now leave," and it's a bit jarring. Even the exiting the vault moment, a staple of the series, is done with a nonchalant, "this doesn't really matter" attitude. You just kind of leave, no big moment, the vault's already empty, it just opens, and you're out. Now the upside to this intro issue is that for some people, it's just a way to get quicker into the action. Some people don't like all the theatrics, some people don't enjoy those long intros and the going to the vault and having your birthday party, and that's fine. And for a lot of people, this is just like, hey, let me play. And that's exactly what Bethesda is doing here. This is where a secondary concern actually begins. Fallout 76's world prioritizes different realities than one might traditionally expect. 76 wants you to earn new things through its living world functions. It wants you to earn new weapons, parts, plans, through things like its live events and its multiplayer-driven narrative, at least through what most of us have experienced. This is fine, but I think that in order to ensure a more level playing field, Bethesda took away a lot of what made exploring their world so great. Bethesda wants to make sure that you aren't going off and finding an overpowered weapon from the jump and dominating low-level players right out of the gate, but that's nullified anyways with the level requirements placed on certain equipment and weapons, yet there are a lot more boarded houses. Boarded up doors in 76, there's a lot of empty houses, a lot of purposeless locations. And when you do find a location that looks interesting, there's been far too many occasions that I've walked out of that locale wondering why I even wasted my time exploring it, leaving with no loot, or new guns, or cool side stories. And now the same can be said for a lot of open world games, but if I'm meant to spend hundreds of hours in this world, I want exploration to be incentivized. I want loot to be part of that incentivization. Not in an afterthought kind of way meant to encourage me to engage in live events or daily or weekly challenges. This can be fixed. It may take time, hell, it may not even be a problem in late game environments, but loot placement can be shifted, and I hope that it either becomes a moot point or is fixed. Again, positives. This may not even be a problem later in the game. This may not even be a problem at all once you get past the first, half of that narrative structure. And more importantly, it just may not matter to a lot of people. A lot of people are here to go and kill things with their friends in a Fallout-like RPG environment, and so empty houses and a little bit less of the side stories that you kind of see, the environmental storytelling, might not be a huge deal. And more importantly, it may have allowed Bethesda to focus on other things that those people deem more important. It may take a back seat, and it may even change with content updates, so this one may not be a big deal either, but to me it is. But then, well, you probably knew this next part was coming. I actually came into the beta with the attitude of, well, this is Bethesda, of course, there's going to be bugs, and it's also a beta, so there's really going to be some bugs. But what I didn't formulate throughout that thought process was how the Bethesda problems of past would impact a multiplayer experience in 2018. I played on a PS4 Pro and then on an Xbox One X. I had the biggest problems on the Pro. Some of these were typical beta issues. Server disconnects happened constantly, crashing occurred on 5 occasions, and once it took me 20 minutes of waiting to get into the game. But that stuff isn't concerning in a beta environment. What is the other problems I encountered. Lag was prevalent, not just in PvP scenarios, but in PvE as well. Enemies would disappear and reappear in totally new locations, bullets wouldn't land at all, enemies would freeze. These problems were so prevalent that I find it hard to believe that they can be reasonably fixed in just a couple weeks. Server lag like this will break a game that's dependent on seamless PvE and PvP. And this seeming PvE lag is actually a strange problem I didn't think would exist at all. And the bigger problem is that the gunplay is already mediocre at best in Fallout games. So now you have a mediocre shooter that's got even more hindrances thrown on top of it. If PvP is going to be a reasonable option, that subpar gunplay can't also be met with lag. But again, maybe just a beta issue, albeit a crippling one. However, there's other problems that are too egregious to ignore. On PC, a bug actually wiped the entire game off of people's systems. It was recently discovered that movement speed was tied to frame rate, which means that users could artificially manipulate their frame rate to get an advantage over other players. Certain systems were also just not built for live play as well. Not being able to pause time to access your Pip-Boy makes it useless half the time. VATS is now just a strange hit-or-miss targeting system, systems that probably should have been adjusted differently. Fallout 76 is also being touted as an evolution in the way that Bethesda makes their games. It's been on display as a seamless multiplayer Fallout game, but nothing's really evolved technically either. Lighting appears to be a bit better, some assets look prettier in this game, others look worse than 4, the colors are bright and vibrant, but Nightfall can wash things out a bit too much. But most importantly, these technical hiccups Bethesda is already known for are still here, and still impact any immersion you might have in this world. You can bet that won't be changing. There really isn't a positive slant to this one, but it is worth noting that a lot of people are running the game great on their PCs. A lot of people are having absolutely no issues, and that's amazing. These issues may be a little bit more isolated than some people think they are. Some of them, like the frame rate tying issue, is a universal issue, but the actual running of the game may not be a huge problem for a lot of people. But the rest of the stuff, the Bethesda bugs, you know where you stand on this already. As of today, Fallout 76 is in an unacceptable state technically in ways that I fear Bethesda does not have the capacity to fix or time to fix before launch. But if they can, that would be a wonderful feat from a development studio that clearly understands what needs to be done. I just hope they make that happen. But I think now is a good time to mention 2 things that I think speak to the game and its systems in general, both good and bad. I kind of knew this going in, and this is an issue that isn't going to matter to a lot of people, but I still think it's worth mentioning, especially because of this trend of companies marketing their multiplayer games as single-player friendly. Fallout 76 really isn't that single-player friendly at all, at least thus far. Not in a mechanical sense. Yes, the narrative throughline is there, you don't feel like too much is out of reach, you're not being locked away from a whole slew of content. You can play it by yourself, but it is definitely not built with single player in mind, which is something Todd Howard himself has said and mentioned. The game is just a little bit too empty feeling and quite lonely when playing by yourself. Sure, you can interact with other players, whom I saw and ran into frequently enough. You can trade with them, which was almost never successful. You can even kill them, as long as you're past level 5, but almost no one is mic'd up. And when Bethesda made the decision to make a near NPC-less world, I don't think I quite realized just how much that would matter. Early game traders are just bots that you can find behind cages with very little to say, which is fitting because you have nothing to say to them. The quest line so far seems more about putting you and your friends in combat and camp defense situations than it is about giving you something to think about. This one actually has the clearest positive, and I don't know if it's very much a positive as much as it's a specific design choice that was made for a very legitimate reason, and it's that the game wants you to play with others. The game does everything it can to push you towards grouping up with someone or playing with your friends, because that's the way Bethesda designed this game to operate and function. That may not be the worst thing in the world. If the game isn't designed for single player in mind, even if they do say, single player friendly, then a game designed to push you towards grouping up might actually be doing you a service. I'm sure I'll have much more to say about this in my full write-up about the final product once we see what's in store late game, but for once, a Fallout game truly feels desolate. You do feel isolated, and it's not necessarily the greatest feeling. It certainly isn't all bad, but before we get to the not all bad, it's worth pointing out that the game does emphasize the kinds of things that I wasn't a huge fan of in Fallout 4. There is an emphasis again on settlement or camp building. There's an emphasis again on the kind of tower defense, defend your camp stuff that I wasn't really particularly fond of in the first place, but underneath all the nonsense, this is still a Fallout game. The world's creatures are cooler than ever thus far. The new Scorched mutation is a creepy and aggressive shift from the traditional ghouls. I also think that the shift to this Appalachian-like environment is nearly as refreshing as the shift to Boston was. The details are also at the very peak of Bethesda's work, at least in the small things. The ability to look at your Pip-Boy as a dedicated screen is a nice touch, the world map is incredibly beautiful, and the perk cards, as well as the notifications that constantly pop up through your playtime, are also wonderfully animated and a sight to behold. The fact that there's a through narrative and side quest at all should be a good way to engage players that choose to play together, and if Bethesda plays their cards right, they can take advantage of the new bobblehead system that provides short-term boost to keep pushing new collectibles into the game, and the perk card system is also a nice way to streamline the perk system without stripping it down too much. And look, it's not hard to imagine that Bethesda can't provide quality content to the game post-release and make the endgame something truly interesting. Maybe it's blind optimism, but I'd have to imagine they've got a good plan in place for steady content post-release, and hopefully Bethesda can manage to get that content out without charging people an arm and a leg to access that content, and hopefully they can do it in a way that keeps everybody on the same playing field without singling out certain player bases or taking away content from people that should have access to it. I will do a full write-up on 76 after the game is out in its completed state. That just obviously didn't feel right for a beta. That video will be the normal heavily stylized write-up I normally make. But as my experience with the beta continued to go downhill, I felt this preview becoming a necessity. I do not know whether or not you should spend your money on Fallout 76. Hell, if you've played it, you probably already have. If you're not a fan of the Bethesda bugs, this is going to be a much more grating experience for you. If Bethesda cannot fix some of these problems before release, this is probably going to be a much more grating experience for everyone. But what I will say is that I think more so than any Bethesda game in the past 2 decades, Fallout 76 is a total unknown in both quality and in the quantity of what you're getting. This is absolutely not the Fallout game we're used to, and you must keep that in mind as you play or make your buying decision, or you will be in for a rotten surprise. I feel like Bethesda themselves has actually done a great job of saying, look, this is not your typical Fallout game. But that doesn't mean it gets a free pass for all of its problems. I don't know what Fallout 76 will be in 2 weeks or so, but what it is now is something to be very cautious of. Let's hope Bethesda can turn this around, and fast, because this idea should in theory be an incredible one. Well guys, that's it for today's video, and now it's your turn. The start of a discussion. What do you guys think about Fallout 76? What you've played, what you've seen? Will you be playing it with friends, or will you be playing it by yourself? What concerns you, and what excites you? I really want to know how people actually feel about Fallout 76, as non-influencers, as people just playing games or just love games, I want to know what you guys think. So let me know down in the comments below the answers to those questions and anything else you feel about Fallout 76. As always, I'm going to try to answer as many comments as I can. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you're not yet a member of this team, press subscribe. I put out gaming analysis and examinations, more scripted usually than this one. Once, sometimes twice a week, but they'll come when they come. But I do want to say something really quickly about Fallout 76. I have a lot of hope that Bethesda, over the course of maybe a few months, can turn 76 into something better than it is now. That's not to say it's not good now. It's just to say that I don't particularly enjoy what I played. Granted, I haven't gotten to the late game or the end game. No one has. The game's not out yet. We're only playing a beta. But I'm not super enthused about what I have gotten my hands on. It doesn't mean you won't be. It just means I'm not. But I have faith that what will be here in 4 or 5 months is a much better game. I don't think that's even a question. So I don't want to say that you should make your purchasing decision based on the beta. I think you should make your purchasing decision on whether or not you want to be an early adopter into something that's certainly going to have to improve over time. So maybe just think about it that way. But there's a lot of good here. It's still a Fallout game. It's still enjoyable. I hope that this becomes more than what it is now. And I think it will. Last thing, you guys saw this video. It's a little bit different than the Red Dead video. As things progress, what will happen now is every week one of those Red Dead style videos come out. The heavily stylized, long form videos that are super edited, going in depth about a game that's out, or an issue with a game, or something great about a game. That'll come once a week. Every once in a while, though, something like a beta comes along that doesn't really need that whole thing going on, especially when there's nothing certain or set in stone, and that's when these kind of write-ups will happen. So you can look forward to those maybe once a week as well. But the next big, heavily stylized Clean Prince video will come next week, late next week, and it'll be Black Ops 4. So keep an eye out for that. And last thing, the giveaway winner from last week was announced. If you see it in your comments, hit me on Twitter or Instagram or wherever, so that way I can get your information, send you your game. And until next time, guys, I'm out.